Hi, this is Gurasi Singh, and you're listening to my Thick Accent podcast. So, before I got my current job in health advertising, I gave tons of job interviews. And this one time, an interviewer asked me, "Did you have any difficulties communicating in English when you moved here?" And I'm sure many fellow South Asians can relate to this situation where we are also asked, "How is your English so good?" To which I replied, "Sir, 40% of the Indian population speaks English. In fact, it's one of our official languages." And my guest today has a better answer for you all. He moved to Canada with his family in 2018. After a decade of experience in the alcohol marketing industry in India, he wasn't afraid to uproot himself and start his Canadian journey. He has worked with global companies such as Bacardi and SAB Miller, championed the marketing of Sazerac portfolio of brands in British Columbia. He currently works with PMA, a reputed Canadian beverage alcohol company, as a national brand manager. His colleagues describe him as the mastermind leader, quizzer, and innovator. Let's learn more from him about his journey of restarting his career in Canada and the reply to the question that the interviewer asked me. Please welcome Rishin Chatterjee.
I thank you very much. I think, Gurusis, thanks for inviting me to your podcast. I am absolutely honored to be here. I think, obviously, I'm not used to speaking a lot, so this is obviously a unique experience for me. Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, whenever I've been asked this question, all I tell people is that, especially in Canada, I say that we've been learning English as long as you've been learning English,
Exactly,
because
yeah.
just like you, we were under the British too. So English was one thing that they imparted on us, and today there are more English speakers in India than Canada, to put it in
Absolutely,
perspective.
yeah.
So yeah, I think, but as I keep telling a lot of newcomers, and I mean, I am a marketer, and I think a lot of my work that I do apart from my normal job, is I work a lot with immigrants, because I have faced a lot of struggle in life in terms of the last 4 or 5 years to establish myself here. And I work a lot with newcomers just to kind of guide them as to how they can navigate the job market.
Mhm.
It's obviously it's voluntary for me. I just enjoy doing it because I just find it nice to see people happy and succeed with just a few tips that maybe I can provide here and there. The only thing that I tell them is that communication is the key, and what they need to do, especially when they're communicating for jobs and they're trying to interact with people, is they need to have they need to reduce the tempo of their voice. They can't speak as fast as we speak in South Asia, because a lot of people will not be able to comprehend what they're saying. And second is they need to start using Canadian words. The way Canadians use English is very, very different from the way we've typically learned English at school or university. So these are
Exactly,
the
yeah.
two things that I just say. I do not ask anybody to. I mean, I don't know how thick my accent is, but I do not generally ask people to, change their accents to kind of endear themselves to an interviewer or someone who they're speaking with. I'd much rather they bring their authentic self, but they understand the nuances of professional communication in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, bringing your authentic self is something most essential in a job interview, absolutely. And do whatever comes naturally to you. Don't force yourself to really copy a particular accent or any particular person. Yeah. So, Rishin, before we dive deeper into your experience of talking to newcomers and international students, especially, and also about your professional career in Canada, since we are in the final month of 2022, I want to ask you, what are you most grateful for the year 2022?
Well, I think, it's been an amazing journey. So I started off my new job this year. I think it's been
Mhm.
a great experience. I think it's been an amazing place to work with a lot of challenges. And, the kind of professional I am, I can't live a normal life. For me, I need challenges. I literally need puzzles to get my brain working and enjoy and wake up every day and solve those. So I think my company's given me quite a lot of those challenges. So I'm grateful
Mhm.
for that. I'm grateful to definitely be an important cog in the machine, because sometimes you get lost in the whole professional space. Personally, I think, by grace of God, I think the family's been doing amazingly well. They've done amazingly well this year with the kids going into school, the elder one going into high school. My wife's job literally stabilizing quite a bit this year. So yeah, I mean, I think in the normal process of life, I think it's been a great year.
Awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. So let me also take you back to the time you spent in India. You are from Calcutta. Tell us about, all growing up phase. How was your childhood and how did you get into this, alcohol marketing industry business? Tell us all about that.
I think I mean, my family has been generally a very, very liberal family. And my parents have always been, they've kind of inculcated a lot of good values in me, especially tolerance in terms of understanding the other person's point of view, not being afraid to
Hmm.
experiment, not being afraid to try things for yourself, being transparent. I think these are some of the important things that have lived on with me as I've grown up, to be honest. And obviously, Calcutta being a city which I would say is one of the culturally pretty mature cities by Indian standards. So I
Hmm.
think we were exposed to a lot of media, whether it was international, whether it was local. I think that kind of gave a pretty global perspective towards life. I think even though we were sitting in a classroom in Calcutta, we were pretty much attuned with what was happening almost everywhere around the world, and obviously that made a young boy dream. It's as simple as
Hmm.
that. I
Yeah.
mean, it's obviously you're from India. You know how difficult it is to maybe move abroad and things like that. I mean, some days, I mean, it's for us, the fact that this has been a reality itself is a miracle because of all the struggles that we have to
Hmm.
do to move
Yeah.
from there to here. I'll come to the Canadian struggle later, obviously. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think then obviously, like any Indian parent, my parents would have probably wanted me to be an engineer first up, even though I had absolutely zilch understanding of science after my 10th. But yeah, I think later on, good sense prevailed, and they lived out their value of allowing me to experiment, which is how I got into hotel management. And obviously, the place where I did hotel management from, I realized in hindsight that that was one of the best colleges in India. But my life has been interesting because I've never worked in a hotel after that. But I think
Hmm.
hotel management gave me a lot of good values in terms of being able to communicate with strangers. I think that became a very important thing. And obviously, living on your own brings with it its own challenges and how you work across.
Hmm.
So I always say that I'm fully loaded in terms of being able to live alone and doing my own stuff. So that's something that
Mhm.
hotel management definitely taught us. Not to mention the fact that it got to meet a lot of interesting people, made some great friends who are still very much in touch. Who are now almost 23 years later. And yeah, I think then work started. I worked for 2 years in sales and marketing. Then I decided I'm going to do an MBA. It was always on the cards, but the timing obviously became important. So I did my MBA from International Management Institute, Delhi, and I passed out in 2006. So, and after that, I jumped head on into the professional space, and I've been there since. So, yeah, I think I would not say that my childhood was something extraordinary. I think it was a typical tier A city Indian kid childhood, I would say.
Mm.
And yeah, I think we made good use of it. Simple as that.
Do you make that conscious effort of instilling your culture or maybe the language into your children?
Well, I have seen two sides of the story here. I've seen kids who do not speak their mother tongue at all, but when there are cultural festivals and stuff, I've seen their parents drag them and making them perform Indian stuff on stage. That's the
Mhm.
other
Yeah.
side.
Hmm.
In our house, we never forced our children to do anything like that. But yes, I think it's for us. It's important to instill the value of trilingualism. So I
Mm.
think at home we speak English, we speak Bengali, we speak Hindi. We speak all three as a normal part of communication. So even if my kids are sometimes not even speaking the two Indian languages, but they understand the languages pretty thoroughly. So
Okay.
for us, I think what we do inside home is where culture comes from. And that's what we've
Mm.
always tried to maintain.
Okay. So how did you then get introduced to this career, that you have chosen? It's not like a traditional career that one chose to get into. Tell us about that.
Well, alcohol is obviously a very taboo subject in India. I was
Yeah.
lucky to get a management trainee position at SAB Miller, which at that time was the biggest beer company in the world. And that's where I started. It was a good for a guy of 25 years old. Getting free beer was obviously a huge incentive to start off a career. And I think a lot of learning. I think the Sab Miller Management Trainee Program was one of the best. I would say. I mean, it inculcated a lot of what do I say, professional sensitivities in me, because we had to travel. I mean, I was in Andhra Pradesh. I remember I was originally based out of Hyderabad and then moved to Kerala. So, and for a guy who's a Bengali who doesn't know any of the languages, it was an absolutely amazing challenge, which I kind of took with both my hands and was grateful
Mhm.
for it. We had to travel to rural areas. At the same time, we were making PowerPoint presentations to management. At the same time, we were working the market in rural India, and in like, I mean, I can't even describe. I mean, they're like small hamlets, literally, with one or two liquor stores in the whole place. And there was sometimes there would be one liquor store in Kerala. I remember there was one liquor store in like a radius of like 50 odd kilometers. Sometimes, so there was so it taught you a lot. It taught you different how different cultures assimilate. It taught you about cuisines. It taught you about what do I say, sense of humor, which was very different. Because I remember, so we always knew Kerala as God's own country, right? I mean, that's what the tagline was as a tourism thing. And when you
Yeah.
go there, and people out there will say, yes, God's own country, but devil's own people. And when you hear people who are actually Keralites sitting in Cochin or sitting in Trivandrum saying that, you are like, man, these guys have a sense of humor. So you pretty much inculcate such a lot of the cultural beings. And I always keep telling, and I've lived practically all over India. So I tell people I'm more of an Indian than a Bengali,
Hmm.
because the fact that I've lived all over the country has inculcated all these different sensitivities into me, and I just absolutely revel in that.
So you did work. We'll talk more about the work that you have did here in the same industry. If you can just describe like briefly about the differences in work culture here in the same industry and in India. If you can tell us about that.
See, I think, and this is a conversation that I often have with my colleagues in my current role. The fact
Mhm.
that alcohol is a taboo subject in India. Alcohol has its own set of very gray government rules in different states in India, and even marketing rules for marketing and things like that. And the amount of customization that you need to do is immense.
Mm.
And it's like you might organize an amazing event, but on the day of the event, a government official might just come and shut it down because you've not, you know,
Mm.
done stuff that would be considered illegal in Canada, but there people
Yeah.
would have expected it as the norm.
Mm.
So a lot of your planning and your execution might just go up in smoke because of government whims and fancies. Compared to that, I think the Canadian market is far less chaotic. It's far more rule based, and the fact that alcohol here is not seen as taboo, it's more of a consumer packaged good. It comes into more of a CPG space like soap and shampoo, obviously with its own
Ye-
regulations. I think that makes it
Yeah.
a far more amenable workplace with the right with rewards to kind of incentivize you if you're able to take risk, or if you're able to design some amazing promotions with keeping the market that you're operating in mind. So I think someone who's worked in the alcohol industry in India will probably
Mhm.
find working in the alcohol industry in Canada so much more rewarding.
Okay, Rishin, let's just get into your Canadian journey then. So you came on a holiday in 2016 and you fell in love with the culture and the environment here and you decided to leave your established career and moved. And I remember you also telling me that after your 12th grade, you wanted to move, but your parents didn't let you. Tell us about that as well.
Well, it would be a bit too harsh on them to say that they didn't let me, but
Oh,
I
okay.
think, and I honestly don't blame them, because what happens is that obviously different generations have different ideas of sustenance. So
Yeah.
my parents didn't have a house of their own. We were living on rent, and for them at that time, the priority more than my education was more than my international education. My hotel management was quite an expensive course by Indian standards, but
Hmm.
obviously studying abroad brings out a whole different equation in terms of finances, which obviously was beyond reach, because at that time my parents wanted to really set up their own house. And I think that in hindsight that became very important, because having a roof over your head is so much more important. And I mean, initially, obviously, as a young kid of 17, 18, I obviously was very, very angry. I was like, oh my god, this is an opportunity lost kind of a thing. But as I grew up, as I've become a parent on my own, I understand what the generational priorities could be. And so yeah, it didn't happen at that time. But obviously,
Hmm.
as I said, I kept myself open to experimenting. I kept myself open to looking at different avenues. And it so happened that my first cousin lived in Calgary. He still lives there, in
Hmm.
fact, and he studied in Alberta. And he was always like, "You must come here on a holiday. You must come here on a holiday." And finally, when we were able to do it in 2016, I think what I was 35-year-old, and the first thing that came to my mind at that time was, man, there is so much of world that's still left to be discovered.
Explode. Yeah.
Because I mean, I had been to Australia, I had been to quite a few countries in Asia before, but Canada was a wholly different experience. And I guess we didn't come here as tourists. We came here to live with my cousin. We spent 3 weeks. Yeah, we did go to a lot of places and had fun in BC and Alberta. But essentially, we got a huge chance to live out that life for a couple of weeks. Going to the retail, how things work, and obviously, I kept bombarding my cousin with a lot of questions as to you know how life is in general. And
Yeah.
once we kind of made an assessment uh, of the whole piece, I think that's when my wife and I, we kind of uh, took it upon us to kind of uh, think of a move to Canada. And
Mm.
I was established in India. I was general manager marketing for Lafarge, which is one of the biggest construction companies in the world. And I was handling a portfolio which was almost like close to $15 million.
Mm.
And for us, but then at the same time, I was willing to roll the dice. For me, I think
Hmm.
life has been one big adventure, and I have no regrets with that. And I realized that this would be a good project for 10 to 15 years at least when the kids grow up, because I know how difficult financially, I mean, obviously, having seen my own experience, I knew
Hmm.
how difficult it was financially to kind of get someone or get your kids to study abroad with an Indian income.
Hmm.
And I realized that the sacrifices that my wife and I would probably make today would probably help them in a much good stead 10, 15 years down the line. Giving them a more robust environment to thrive in, giving them a more what do I say, culturally open environment to thrive in. And that's when we took the call. Obviously, we were worried about what would happen with the career, because ultimately you would need a proper Canadian income to survive. I mean, we were not coming here to live on a government dole.
Yeah.
So naturally that became a crucial factor, and then we decided, yeah, it's worth taking the chance. And then we got the paperwork done in about, I think, 14 odd months. And yeah, July 2018 we were here.
I remember you also telling me that you told your wife that what's the worst can happen? I'll go there, I'll work there, even work at Walmart, I'll stay there for a couple of months. We might even come back. I'll come and say sorry to few people, and I will get back to the industry.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, I'm a very what do I say, I make a lot of backup plans. For me, there are plan B's and plan C's in my mind all the time for everything. And my daughter keeps joking with me. She says, you set alarms for your alarms. So yeah, I'm a bit of a person like that. So obviously, I do think of a plan B and plan C as to what happens if things don't work out. Obviously, no
Mhm.
one comes with the intention that things won't work out, but you never know
Yeah.
what happens, right? And
Mm.
to tell you about Walmart, I did tell my wife that yes, I'll work in a Walmart, but you know something? I applied for a job in Walmart and was rejected. It's in Saskatchewan. That's the day panic set in. I was like, man, I can't
Mm.
even get a job in Walmart in Canada. What am I going to do now?
You were destined to do bigger things, right? Better things. That's why you didn't get to go there.
Well, I believe in doing. I don't think there's any bigger or smaller. I think everyone does their job honestly, and at the end of the day, if I think
Yeah.
if you do your job with a fair bit of sincerity, and if you keep in mind, which is open to learning, which is open to adapting, which is open to be coached, I think anybody can succeed.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree with that. So you landed in July 2018. Tell us about your first day. What was going on in your mind? Because this time it wasn't a vacation that you came on, it was a full fledged move. What was going on in your mind then?
See, I have to thank my cousin Rishav. I keep taking his name, and because had they not been here, he and his wife, had they not been here, it probably wouldn't have been possible for us to move. And I still remember on that day, I think it was 25th of July, we flew in from Tokyo. We came from Delhi via Tokyo to Calgary. We landed straight out there, and he was there to pick us up at the airport. And for
Mhm,
the first 2 weeks, we were just chilling, literally chilling.
mhm,
It was summer
mhm,
vacations out here, and I mean, my brother
mm,
took some time off, and we really had. I mean, they went out of their way to make us feel absolutely comfortable. I mean, it felt like our own home. And since we had been there before, obviously there was a certain level of comfort. And it's only after that then I contemplated the move to Saskatchewan because we had come on the immigrant nominee program.
mhm,
So while sitting at his home and at least having that safe space, we started talking about, we started connecting with landlords in Saskatchewan. We started deciding on what our travel plans would be. I still remember we took the Greyhound bus, which no longer exists, from Calgary to Regina because we had
mhm,
like, what, 16 odd pieces of luggage. And then, so initial days were pretty smooth. I mean, obviously, because we had someone to stay on with, I think a lot of people are not as lucky as us. And that's why I think that landing services is something very, very crucial that this country literally requires to invest in. Even if
mhm,
entrepreneurs want to invest in business, I think that's something very important. And yeah, I mean, we came in with a lot of hope. We came in with a lot of hope. I think the most important thing for us was that we knew what we were getting into. I think a lot
mm,
of people, when they immigrate, and myself included, initially you will always have a feeling that, man, we hear there are such a lot of jobs in Canada, we'll definitely get in. We'll definitely get a good job which is in our existing profession.
yeah.
And then when you start hitting the roadblocks, that's when your mind tends to kind of work in a different way, right? And so we knew what we were getting into. I mean, for me, as I said, I was pretty willing to start from scratch. It was not something that I was averse to doing. I knew that it wouldn't be that easy to get a job in the same field uh, as I was in India, obviously,
Yeah.
and definitely at the same level. So I would say we came prepared.
You did talk about the jobs, and the very first job that you took was, giving out the Uber Eats coupons.
Yeah, there's a story. I mean, I mean, I still tell people, from general manager marketing in India to giving out Uber Eats coupons at a corner of Victoria Park in Regina. Wow, talk about stories.
Yeah.
So I think I we kind of came in with a mentality that we had to start getting our Canadian income meter running. I think that became
Mhm.
a pretty much a cornerstone, and obviously
Hmm.
I wouldn't expect. I didn't want my wife to start even looking for a job at that time because she had the kids to take care of. Obviously, the kids being younger, they would
Yeah.
depend a lot on her. And obviously, as in, I really needed to start the Canadian income meter, and then I saw this ad which was calling out for brand ambassadors for Uber Eats, which was going to launch in
Mm.
Regina, and I applied for it, and yeah, I got it. It was a 2 day gig. It was not a permanent gig. It was a 2 day gig. I was happy to take it
Mhm.
up. I still have the Uber Eats hat with me. I've kept it as a souvenir,
Okay.
and yeah, I mean, it was a good hat. Also, I sometimes wear it. And yeah, I mean, we and yeah, those were the 2 days. I mean, it gave me a good start. At least, if you really want to start from scratch, I was not just talking. I was doing what I intended or what I was saying that it was
Yeah.
required. So I was ready for it,
Mm.
I would say. And then it was I mean, LinkedIn became a huge part. I mean, I applied for a lot of jobs. I must have applied for about 50 or 60 odd jobs. I sent
Mm-hmm.
connection requests. And that's where I saw the gap. I saw the gap between a professional like me, who's sitting in a city like Regina, which has 200,000 people, which has so many job openings, and no one is even willing to talk to you.
Mm.
That to me, and what I saw in 2018, that's now happening in 2022 when people are not finding people to fill spaces.
Mm.
But the reluctance of hiring managers at that time to look at someone who doesn't talk like them, or who doesn't look like them, or who doesn't have a name that sounds Anglo-Saxon or familiar to them, the fact that they would not even give me the courtesy of a basic chat,
Mm.
that at times was very difficult to fathom. I was like, man, I'm sitting right here. I mean, this is my experience. I've experienced of almost 10 years, and you are looking for people with 3 4 5 years of experience. I'm willing to start my at a junior level, and you're not even
Yeah.
looking at me. It's crazy. I mean, I still have some of those messages preserved on LinkedIn where I've introduced myself, I wanted to chat. There has been zero response. And
Mm.
today when hiring folks complain that there aren't enough people to fill spaces, my mind goes back to that 4.5 years ago.
Why do you think, Rishin, that's happening? Why there are like not enough people to hire?
Well, I think post pandemic, at least, again, this is again what I read. Okay, I believe a lot of people have retired. I think the pandemic has been a great leveler for a lot of people, where they're like, man, we've done our time, let's
Mm.
enjoy life. We don't know how long we are going to live. I think that's been one thing that the pandemic has given a kind of a harsh reality, I would say, to a lot of
Mm-hmm.
folks. And obviously Canada, with a very robust pension and retirement system, I
Mm.
think a lot of people said, okay, this is it. Let me spend time, doing following passion. Let me spend time going back to the farm village that I came from. Let me spend my some time there, or let me go and spend 6 months somewhere in a tropical climate, or let me go and spend whatever 7 8 months traveling, and let me
Mm.
relocate to a different city. And it's not just affected the elderly, it's affected a lot of people who are even young, who actually want to travel different places and live there. I think Canada
Mm.
has an amazing system where it has visa agreements with, I think, about 30 35 countries, where if you're below the age of 35, you can get up to a 2 year working holiday visa in those countries. So I know someone who was in my company who left and went to UK because they've got that privilege.
Mm.
So I think people are becoming more open to experimenting with life and thinking that there is more beyond a job. I think that's what's happening in Canada. Obviously, there's no organic growth of population, as you know, right? So
Mm.
that's why filling in seats is becoming more and more difficult, because you're not finding enough qualified people in the market, or you're not looking at enough qualified people in the market, because
Mm.
your mind, your blinker is set towards a certain set of people who I want to hire, and I will not look beyond it. That to
Yeah.
me is one. Second is obviously, I mean, I don't call it discrimination, but I call it a lack of awareness
Mm.
about the fact that there are a lot of countries in the world where people are extremely educated and qualified, where it's definitely very difficult to get into colleges. I mean, I can definitely speak for India because I know
Yeah.
how difficult the entrance exams are in India, and the amount of rigor that people have to go through. I think a lot of people are not aware of the levels of education uh, that are prevalent in some of these countries, the levels of communication that are present in some of these
Mm.
countries. I think that's where uh, a factor comes in. And also, you tend to kind of frame, it's subconscious, you tend to frame a certain picture. So it's like word association. If I say Asian, you'll think of 10 different words. If I say South
Yeah.
Asian, you'll think of 10 different words. If I say African, you'll think of 10 different words. If I say British, you'll think of 10 different words. So it's also
Yeah.
the subconscious mind association that you have with with stereotyping people from certain places.
The unconscious bias.
The unconscious bias. I think
Yeah.
things will change. I think I already see a lot more. I mean, my company, for example, I'm amazed and I'm proud of the diversity that PMA has. I think it's an amazing thing, and it's continuing. I mean, the fact that
Hmm.
people are being able to look beyond ethnicity, people are being able to look beyond Canadian experience, people are being able to look beyond simple qualifications to recruit the right people who they think are fit. I think a lot of companies are slowly realizing that and making some really really good strides.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me that you worked with the Sharton Hubs, as a regional marketing manager, and you told me that your boss, your senior, he started transferring you the resumes of the South Asians.
Yeah, so that I think to me, it felt a bit funny, but it was also a very
Yeah.
positive development. But at the
Mm.
same time, all I say is that look at individuals on merit. I mean, I am all for diversity, equity, and inclusion. But at the end of the day, if you find that someone is fit for a job, don't look at anything else.
Mm, yeah.
Judge that person. Don't judge that person by gender. Don't judge that person by race. Don't judge that person by whatever orientation. If
The
that person is
name.
good for that job, that person should the name. If that person
Yeah.
is good for the job, come on, take a chance.
Yeah.
That's the only message that I have, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely things are changing, but I feel like there's still a long way to go. Yes, Canada being such a diverse country, people from all around the world come here, but I still feel like there are some sort of stereotypes that are associated. And at the same time, I'll add to my this point that a lot of those stereotypes are started by those communities only, which have come from different parts of the world. Like, for example, in our case, I know that there are certain stereotypes which were started by Indian communities only. Like in my case, someone wearing a turban is good for driving a truck, for example. A lot of people kind of said that to me on my face. So I feel like it's not only the people, the natives, it's also the people who come from different part of the world who come with those stereotypes with them.
Yeah, that's where I'm a huge confused set because I come from Calcutta. Too many people don't immigrate from Calcutta any which way.
Hmm.
At the same time, I think of myself as a complete South Asian. At the same time, I've lived my lifestyle in India was very similar to the lifestyle that I've lived in Canada. So
Hmm.
I'm a confused package. People don't know where to stereotype me.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I tell you, I mean, it's not it's that. Yes, I think one important decision that my wife and I took is that we don't want to come here and live in a second India. We want our kids to enjoy Canada. We want our kids to get exposed to the Canadian culture. Yes, I'm not saying that I'm going to
Hmm.
shun the Indian culture. Yes, if I need
Absolutely, yeah.
to go and eat great Indian food, I will go to certain places in Lower Mainland Vancouver where I'll go and get it. But
Yeah.
if I am looking for comfort within my community just to survive in this country, then it doesn't make sense. We were living better off in India. So my advice to the newcomers and irrespective of where you come from is that yes, keep your roots, keep in touch with your community, but don't make that community the mainstay of your existence in Canada. That would probably be what I would say.
Absolutely, Rishin. I think I've mentioned it also so many times on the pod with other guests as well that whenever international students come here, they try to fit in within their own community, within their own set of people that they have come with. But it's really important to get out of it, get yourself exposed to different languages because there's so much opportunity in Canada to learn from these different cultures and this variety of people that can just help you like that get those learnings can stay with you forever and they will help you just grow in your career professionally and even
Yeah, and
personally.
these things are in your control. I mean, it's always important to look at the aspects that are in your control versus that are not in your control.
Hmm.
So if someone is giving you a job or not is not in your control. I mean, I have been in a situation where I worked as a contract employee where I did amazingly well, but when the job came up to be permanent, I was rejected for the same role twice. I
Hmm.
mean, yes, these kind of things will happen, but these are not in your control. What is in your
Hmm. Yeah.
control is to grow. What is in your control is to look at the next opportunity. What is in your control is to, uh, you know, enjoy what Canada has to offer.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now, if you are going to be looking for a safety net, inside your community or inside the geographical area where you're located, I would say that's a very short term thinking.
So, talking more about your career, you have worked with Bacardi in India and in Canada as well. Tell us, how did you get that role in Canada?
Again, I mean, I think LinkedIn has helped exceptionally, and I've also been lucky to have interacted with some amazing people in the professional life. I mean, and I'm so grateful to them. So I met a gentleman who worked for Bacardi in Western Canada, and
Hmm.
I simply sent him a message on LinkedIn saying that I work for Bacardi in India,
Hmm.
and could I have a chat with him just to understand what kind of opportunities would happen, could be there for me in Canada. And it was so nice of him to actually invite me over to his office and have a
Mm.
chat with me. I think that's where the whole thing started, because I, having worked in a startup before that, I was always under the impression that I can contribute to the professional space here. And alcohol as a subject is something that I've always worked with, and I've had I've had quite a lot of experience in India as well. I worked
Yeah.
in North India, I worked in West, I worked in South. In all three regions, I worked in the alcohol industry. And so for me, I wanted to get that experience into play here, because this was a pretty mainstream. This is a pretty mainstream profession in Canada, and the gentleman was really gracious. He kind of had a chat with me for about 45 minutes, discussing my career, discussing the stuff that I've done for Bacardi and the alcohol industry in India.
Hmm.
And then he offered me a contract role, which was there. And the contract role became it was initially for 6 months, and then it got extended till about 9 months. So that's how my alcohol journey started, and then one thing led to the other, and I kept getting better and better jobs.
Mm. And now you are the national brand manager with PMA Canada, which is a beverage manufacturing company, and they're also the distributors, right?
So PMA doesn't manufacture. PMA is an agency. PMA deals with a lot of these global suppliers and local suppliers to get their product into the market. So effectively,
Hmm.
we are we have some really high end brands and suppliers, and we take their products to the market with our marketing expertise and with our sales expertise. That's what we do. We develop these products into success stories in different provincial markets of Canada. One great thing about this role is that it's given me an opportunity to understand the eastern part of the country. I've always lived in Western Canada,
Mm.
so I think it's given me a huge insight into understanding the eastern part of the country, Ontario, Quebec, the Atlantics, and it's great to interact with a lot of people from that side of the country and understand what the perspectives are, understand how so alcohol is a regulated profession, so how the rules of selling alcohol and distributing alcohol differ uh, from province to province. So I think that's an amazing learning experience for me. And yep, it's been touchwood. It's been great so far.
So what are like some of the skills that one has to develop if any of our listeners wants to get into this industry?
Well, I think understanding regulations is very important. One, understanding your end consumer becomes very important. I think this is one profession where you have to spend a lot of time outside your office. You have to actually observe consumers. You have to see which products, what they're doing. There's a lot of scope to innovate. There is a lot
Mm-hmm.
of scope to be able to, you know, strategically plan the moves of your brands,
Mm.
depending on what you see as a consumer opportunity, what you see the competitor environment doing. So I think it's an inculcation of that, and obviously keeping an open mind and being agreeable to learning new things. I think that becomes a major factor in succeeding in this profession.
Is this something that you wish you knew before you got into this career?
Uh, Not that much, to be honest, because when I got into this career in India way back in 2006, it was a pretty new career, which was actually trying to get into a more mainstream FMCG kind of a space. It was still not there. I
Mm.
mean, with alcohol companies, there's a lot of taboo in India where if you work for an alcohol company once, other professions are not going to take you, and those kind of, there were a lot of these what do I say, prejudices that existed out there. It's only
Yeah.
now that it's become a more mainstream, with companies investing more money in A&P, with companies doing a lot of work with responsible drinking. I think it's become a more mainstream profession. But when I started out, I think even the industry was finding its footing as to where it wants to place itself as a potential employer. So I don't think there's anything new that I'd like to. There was I don't think there's anything I'd wish I knew before that. I think
Mm.
it's pretty much learning on the go.
So, Rishin, also, you did talk about your family in the beginning a little bit. So, tell me, how did your relationship with the money has changed up until today?
Relationship with money.
Yeah.
Well, I think different times in one's life brings out different levels of the relationship changes. Obviously, I think initially I mean, when I moved into Canada, obviously surviving became a major that became the first priority. Establishing your base footing became a priority before you could, literally spread your wings, so to speak. Uh, and I think you obviously become much smarter with money, because you end up earning far less than you were earning in India
Mm.
from a real cost basis, because you're obviously starting from scratch. So you had to
Yeah.
be much more parsimonious with the money that you have. I think the first year was extremely difficult for us because we were focusing on building a base. And I remember, I think I'm very grateful to my wife and kids for support at that time, because I remember for
Mm.
1 year, I think the first year, we ate out of home just once or twice in the whole year.
Mm.
Because for
Wow.
us, and any expenditure that was above $20, we used to literally think twice before doing it, unless it was a basic
Mm.
expenditure, like like rent or like internet or electricity. I mean, those are priorities, those are utilities.
Yeah.
But any other expenditure that kind of exceeded $20, I think we would take a deep hard look as to whether we need to do it or we don't need to do it.
Mm.
And at the same time, the only thing that we did at that time was we did not compromise on the kids needs. So
Mm-hmm.
I think my wife and I, we really, I mean, it wasn't that tough, because as a team, I think when we're operating together as a family unit, it was easy to, I mean, now it sounds very difficult, but when we were living through it, it was okay. I mean, we managed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we became far more responsible with money after coming to Canada. I think that's where the
Mm.
relation, I mean, we understood that the purse was limited. In India, I wouldn't say the purse was unlimited, but definitely from a real value of money perspective versus the level at which I was earning perspective,
Yeah.
I think we had far more cushion. I think eventually that's the cushion that got us the privilege of coming to Canada. Because unless you
Mm.
had a
Yeah.
certain amount of money to come in with, it would have been a difficult ask from day one. And I
Mm.
still remember, I mean, when we took our first condo on rent in Regina, because we didn't have a credit history, I still remember we had to pay 3 or 4 months of rent in advance
Mm.
in lieu of
Yeah.
that. So obviously those were difficult times monetarily, but we managed. I guess, I mean, everyone. It's a question of managing. It's a question of survival, and then slowly we started becoming smarter with money. We started becoming more astute in terms of, just because the income is going up doesn't mean we end up spending a lot. Even today, we end up keeping a very rational control on our spends. We end up, and I have an Excel sheet which my wife and we both maintain, and we have records of every expenditure that we've done for the
Oh,
past four
wow.
and a half years. It just helps us to understand where we are moving from. I mean, it's an Excel, how much of our monthly expenditure has changed when we move cities, when we've added things into the house, when we've had to pay additional stuff, when we bought some luxuries, some necessities, some settlement items. So we have a clear understanding of where we are spending and how much money we are spending. I think it's become a much more responsible relationship with money, is
Mm.
what I would say, in the last 4.5 years in Canada.
So, what advice would you give to somebody who has just recently landed? It could be if you can give us, like, both perspectives, somebody who has come alone, maybe as a international student, maybe, and then somebody who has come with a family, what advice would you give to either of them?
See, I definitely ask everyone to differentiate between your necessities and your luxuries, and have a very, very, very clear perspective of not just the money you've come in with,
Mm-hmm.
but also take a robust understanding at how long that money needs to last for you. Because, when you come as a newcomer, some people get a job in 2 weeks, some people get a job in 8 months or 9 months. So it's important to not, obviously, there are a lot of areas where you can splurge, but it's important to, kind of limit that urge without knowing what your Canadian income source is going to be. That
Mm.
definitely is a factor. For students or for individuals, obviously, I would say it's perhaps slightly easier because you're in control of your destiny in terms of your needs and wants and luxuries.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that you need to go hungry. I'm not saying that you don't buy your essential winter clothes that you need. Don't compromise on those things.
Mm.
Your health is first. You need to,
Yeah.
whatever you need to spend to maintain your health and sanity, go ahead and do it. But yeah, I mean, just monitor your luxuries. I'm not saying don't do it completely, but have a clear understanding of your expenditure versus income at every step. I would recommend noting down every expenditure that you have under different heads and analyzing from time to time as to where you're spending more, where you could spend less, where you could probably end up getting more value, which are the right places to go and shop from. Look at the internet. The internet is a huge friend. I mean, there are
Yeah.
apps that can actually tell you where offers are running at this point in time, so that you can make
Mm.
use of those offers. This country runs on coupons. So
Yeah.
if you have different brands which are offering coupons, I remember uh, I've been using A&W coupons all my life. Maybe because
Mm.
I started off giving out Uber Eats coupons for A&W, and maybe that's the reason. But uh, I always look for coupons, and there's absolutely no. I mean, this society doesn't judge you for reclaiming a coupon. I mean, it's the
Mm.
way of life. You've
Mm.
seen the kind of crowds that happen during Black Friday sales and Boxing Day sales and things like that. It's
Yeah.
massive. People are absolutely happy to do budget shopping. People are absolutely happy to do discount shopping. You are not, unlike India, you're not judged here.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
make take full advantage. If you're getting a 20% off, or even if you're getting a 5% off, it's still money saved.
Mm. Yeah.
So I think being aware of who's offering discounts, when they're offering discounts, when there is a free breakfast somewhere, go for it. no
Mm.
one no one judges you on basis of that. So I think
Yeah.
those are amazing ways to be able to get rational with your money, at least in your starting days.
Yeah, yeah, great advice. And I think you can definitely say that coupons helped you make money and save money as well.
Yeah, I would say so now.
Okay, Rishin, now let's just pivot towards, immigrant networks. It's the organization that addresses the biggest pain point for newcomers, which is the lack of professional network. And you are also an ambassador for them. Tell us all about that and also about the weekly sessions that are organized every Wednesday, if I'm not wrong. Tell us all about that.
So obviously, once I kind of settled into my role and I mean life stabilized professionally somewhat, I realized the amount of pain points that I went through, and I realized that for someone whose communication is probably very good, someone who's as qualified, my qualification, my highest qualification being an MBA, if this is the level that I've had to struggle in Canada to get jobs, or to get the jobs to my liking, or to
Hmm.
get jobs which are at least taking me closer to the level that I left off in India, then a lot of people are not as lucky as me. A
Hmm.
lot of people are faring far worse. And I mean, this economy, this country is a lot of, it's about paying it forward. I have had people who've helped me in my career. I've had some amazing bosses. I've had people who've connected me with people so that I could grow. And for me, it was paying it forward became a very, very major part of this journey. And then I came across Nick Nurani's profile. Nick Nurani is the founder of Immigrant Networks. Amazing
Mm-hmm.
gentleman. He's like a personal friend now. And then I said that, you know what, I really want to help out, and let me know how I can help.
Mm.
And that's when, after some time, we started the ambassador program, where there are other volunteers like me who participate in these Wednesday sessions where newcomers come in as well. And we try and address different topics every week. At the same time, we have Q&As where we try and address the various issues that different people are facing. I mean, it's not a one size fits all. So different people have their
Yeah.
different limitations or different challenges that they're facing in getting employment in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we try and help as many people as we can, at least direct them in the right direction as to how they should channelize their energies, because you can't just simply use the same resume or the same cover letter and apply for 50 jobs and say, oh my god, I applied for 50 jobs but I'm not getting a single
Yeah.
one. So so getting into the to getting into the right process of application, directing, channeling your efforts, being able to network in the right way, being able to what do I say, shortlist the places or the categories you want to work for. These are what I try to help people with in our one-on-one sessions, and also the Wednesday sessions. So Wednesday sessions are a group session, and sometimes we also have the one-on-one sessions. If I think I can help someone with certain things, and they want to chat with me for maybe an half an hour or something on a weekend, I generally give time. I'm happy to advise them and at least give them the experience that I've had in this country,
Mm.
so that, yeah, they can use that to move forward.
And you did have that one video which was about, Canadian experience is not a must. Tell us about that video.
So that is a session that I took for Immigrant Networks, and I think I had also taken it for somewhere else. But originally, I mean, that was it was a session that I did. I think the video is still there on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is a huge pain point where a lot of hiring managers would say you don't have Canadian experience, so you can't get a job.
Mm.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
And when I started working in a professional environment in Canada, I realized that there are a lot of skills that are actually transferable from, say, a place like India.
Mm.
Okay, it's not. I mean, working in the Canadian workplace is not rocket science. It's more of a culture fit,
Yeah. Absolutely.
and the way you can probably move around it. That is what the essence of the presentation was. I mean, to give it to you in a nutshell, it was more about being able to find the kind of right industries. How do you shortlist the companies that you want to work for? How do you start networking with people? I mean, you don't you don't want to network. Your first sentence in the networking shouldn't be, I'm looking for a job, can you help me?
Yeah.
So how do you actually network? Do you have a genuine interest in meeting people? Develop that genuine interest in meeting people. Do you have you come to Canada only to make money? If you've come only to make money, then you should just take the next flight back, is what I tell people. Because unless you enjoy this country, unless you start feeling like a Canadian internally, or at least a Canadian resident internally, you'll never be able to crack uh, the job market, because it's all about mindset. The mindset needs to be right. Here, from my experience, people love chatting with you. People love
Yeah.
interacting, knowing more about each other's stories.
Mm.
And for all you know, someone might help you today. Tomorrow, you might be in a position to help that somebody 1 year
Mm-hmm.
down the line, 2 years down the line, or 5 years down the line. So it's not transactional, it's more of a relationship. And, we Indians, we are, and I mean, being Indian myself, I can say for us, it's always very transaction oriented. I mean, if I get a favor from you, that's it. I've taken the favor and I'm gone. There are very few people who'll actually take pains to maintain that relationship back and forth.
Mm. Yeah.
And out here, if you do not maintain that relationship, you can never expect to go forward. And this is effectively what I try to tell. I try to tell people, try, if you're looking to work in a company, looking to work in a category, try and meet people, whether it's face to face, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's a phone call. talk about your experiences. That way, your first step, under normal circumstances, you are just submitting your resume. A person will see your resume, but at the same time, versus talking to you directly and you being able to talk about your experiences puts you in a very, very different perspective in the eyes of the prospective hiring manager. So when they look at a simple resume and they see that you have not worked for a Canadian company, it's easy to reject you. How much time does a hiring manager spend on resume? At max 2 minutes.
Hmm.
But if you are able to crack a conversation with the person, you probably ask 30 people for a conversation, five will respond. You only need one to respond positively for you and to get a job. So
Hmm.
that's why I say that, it's not about Canadian experience. It's about how you are pitching your experience, which is more important. I hope I've been clear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in one of my previous guests, used the line, don't just collect connections, connect with your connections. And yeah, you said it right that initially when you come, you are so lost and so much anxiety that kicks in, syndrome that kicks in. You need that initial guidance, and I think you are doing this brilliant job. And to all my listeners, to the international students especially, I'll put the link to the video and Rishin's contact in the show notes. Please feel free to connect with him. So now, Rishan, we are in the final segment of the podcast. I call it Beneath the Accent. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. You can answer them in one word or a sentence or howsoever you feel like. The idea is just to know more about you. So let me start by asking you, what is this one advice that you would like to give to your younger self? Tell us, what advice would you give, and at what stage of your life would you like to give that advice?
Uh, to my younger self, I would say, be uh, be more patient. Be more patient for results. I think that's one advice that I would love to give my younger self. And yeah, I'd probably give it maybe when I was in my early 30s, maybe.
So, what's this one habit that you have adopted that has changed your life?
Uh, I don't allow my life to change that easily.
But is this something, an idea that changed your life?
Oh, immigrating to Canada. There's
Hmm.
no there's I mean, in terms of ideas, there cannot be anything more radical that a human being can do, I think. At least for me, that became pivotal because the amount of time and effort we put in building a career in India, and to be able to,
Hmm.
literally leave everything and come over, uh, I think it called for a lot of guts in those days. To me, it looked simple, but in hindsight, when I see the enormity of what we left versus where we came in, I think, like, oh my god, how did we even manage to
Hmm.
pull it off? And I know for a fact that when I was coming in, a lot of people were very apprehensive. There were a fair set of people who were literally waiting with bated breath to see what happens to people like us who are totally established in
Hmm.
India and who are, it's like, who's going to jump into the well first kind of a thing, or who's going to jump into the sea first kind of
Hmm.
a thing. So that definitely was
Yeah.
there. And once people saw how we had settled in, I think I was bombarded with requests to advise people on how to move to Canada. And
Hmm.
and for me, it's I've never sugar coated the Canadian experience. I think that's something that's very important. I've never sugar coated it, and even during the Immigrant Network sessions, I say it how it is. That this is the reality
Hmm.
that you're living with in Canada. If you don't like the reality,
Hmm.
well, maybe this place is not for you, and that's absolutely fine. but
Hmm.
but you have to, be in control of things. I mean, you have to bother about things that are in your control, not things that are out of your control. I think that becomes a very, very crucial thing. I wish I could tell my younger self not to worry so much also, because it tends to
Hmm.
I tend to worry a lot. That's why I have plan B's and plan C's all for everything and anything. So yeah, if I would worry a bit less, maybe I would enjoy life a bit more.
Is there something that you recently buy and you now regret?
um Sorry, very unexciting answer. But yeah, sometimes I experiment with some flavors of coffee which I just don't like, but I have to finish because I buy 14 pods at one time, and I have to finish it because I can't waste it. Yeah, some coffees.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name those coffees, but yeah, sometimes I regret my choice of coffee at times.
So, what's something that you miss the most about Kolkata?
Um, I think what I miss about Calcutta, to be honest, is the culture for sure. Uh, Definitely, the social connect was very very high. I mean, it's like a double edged sword. I
Hmm.
mean, there we were bombarded with social connections. Here we have like
Yeah.
few. So sometimes you miss that. At the same time, you are relieved that you don't have to attend so many functions and you don't have to take care of so many sensitivities. So it's like a double edged sword. But yes, I do miss.
Yeah.
I do miss mixing with friends and family from time to time. I think we had a pretty robust social life out there.
Okay. So, who's your go to person?
Good question. My go-to person, in which way? I mean, in terms of crisis, in terms of advice. What are you? What do you? I mean, can you elaborate?
Tell us about both.
So I am pretty blind in terms of having a go-to person as far as my profession is concerned in Canada. Uh, though there is one
Hmm.
gentleman by the name of Manny Razakos who I met during my work at Bacardi. I think he would qualify closest
Hmm.
as a go-to person. Anytime I need advice, I generally ping him to kind of at least guide me in a direction, because he pretty much understands where I come from. He pretty much understands the potential that I have. So I look to him. I look
Hmm.
to him for guidance from time to time when I need. Personally, I think I I'm very very close to my wife in terms of being the go-to person. I think she's one person that I shared a lot of my mental crisis from time to time as to my worries. And she
Hmm.
always pats me down and says, "Don't worry about it. It's okay. You worry too much." But it's at least reassuring to hear someone say that. So, yeah, I would say, yeah, my wife and yeah, these two would be my go-to people at this point in time.
So, what's next on your bucket list?
Ha, that's a good one. I'm afraid it's not too much. Maybe just a bit of travel someday to a few countries that have been on my bucket list for a long time, but I've never been able to make it so far. Uh, so maybe some travel would be there. I think I've always wanted to visit. I've always wanted to visit South Africa. I've always wanted to visit UK. So I think these two
Hmm.
are pretty much pending on a bucket list thing, and definitely some trips with schoolmates and college mates and close
Hmm.
friends, maybe sometime. Boys trips at times. That's definitely on the bucket list. I have to really convince my wife
Hmm.
to allow me to do that. I'm very very afraid of her, but yeah, I think those are some of the things that I'd love to do. Mix up with friends, go on some boys trips, visit a few countries. I guess, yeah, that's it. I live a very ordinary life. I don't have too many wishes on my list. As long as the normal life is going well, I tend to be happy.
Okay. So, if you could create one law that everybody has to follow, what would it be?
Don't litter ever.
Okay. So, describe Canada in one word or a sentence.
Amazing country. Not perfect, but even they know that it's not perfect.
So, lastly, if you could, Rishan, leave me with one piece of advice, what would it be?
To you,
Yeah.
oh, keep up the good work. Spread the word. I mean, I think it's been amazing. I think the conversation has been meaningful, and I'm sure your other conversations with guests have also been extremely useful for a lot of people. So I would say keep doing the good work. We need more voices like yours to be able to showcase the mentality, to showcase the perspective, and to showcase the point of view. I think all these three things become important, not only to newcomers but also to people trying to understand newcomers in general. So yeah, keep up the good
Hmm.
work.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rishan. And so, on that note, those are all my questions. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and adding value to my listeners. Thank you.
Appreciate the time and appreciate you inviting me here.
Hey, listener, thank you for making it to the end. I highly, highly appreciate you listening the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't as yet, and please share with your friends or anybody you think would like it. And like I always say, we encourage you to follow your heart but also us on Instagram. The handle is mythicaccent. You can also leave us a review or write to us at hello@mythicaccent.com. So stay tuned and let's continue knowing each other beneath the accent.